Yeah, I mean, when we look at our basic evidence request list for a FedRAMP moderate system, we're validating 687 individual artifacts.
For Rev 4 or for Rev 5?
For Rev 5.
Yeah, for Rev 5, yeah.
Yeah, and that's 323 controls. So, I mean, it's a ton of work that goes into it, but it makes sense. The NIST 853 framework, I've seen it implemented poorly where, that org-defined parameter is whenever. And that's not really the intent of it. FedRAMP, I think, puts teeth behind it and says you do this way. And it makes it easier to assess against, too, because you're just basically saying, do you do the thing?
Yeah.
How did you do the thing? Did you document it?
Did you document it? That's the hard part, right?
The documentation is probably the biggest pain point and the biggest barrier to entry for most folks is, I was talking earlier, we get customers that say, I got to go FedRAMP moderate. Why? It's like, well, because somebody told me to. Well, you got to do your FIPS 1IN categorization, so go look up NIST 860 and figure out your information types, and then we'll figure out if you're moderate or not. And then once you figure that out, here's all the other things that you got to do: your SSP, your policies, your procedures, your
plans,
everything, and then document
appendices A through R.
Yes, all of your appendices. I can't believe it's up to R now.
Hey. Welcome to the Paramify podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Scott. I'm here today with Matt Graham, the head of federal services at Prescient Security. We're so excited to have you today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, Matt, you've been in the cyber industry for a while now. You've got all of the certifications. You are a CISSP. We checked his creds before he came in. I'm like, show me your CISSP. I don't know if there's a badge, but I did have a little.
There's a lapel pin.
There's a little pedal pin. I have it.
Yeah, I have it too, and all the little cards that they send you with all your certifications.
Yeah. Legit,
for sure.
Legit. Yeah, I spent a lot of time learning about CCTV cameras, right? When I took it, did you?
Not so much now. I think I way over prepared for it. I think I studied for like 2 years, and by the time I took it, you know how it's that adaptive testing sort of thing. I got through all 125 questions and it shut off, and I panicked like I just lost $600. And I walk out of the room like, oh, did you pass flying colors? Like, yeah, I took way too long to get this thing.
I like that about the CISSP because it told you right away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang it, I studied for way too long. I thought, I think I studied for like 3 months, and I'm like, dang it, like But I've been in the area for a long time, right? Too. When you took it, had you been in there for a while, or just was it?
Yeah, I waited for that exact timeline, so like that minimum requirement of like 4 years. Mm-hmm. But before that, I was Security Plus. Basically, I'm a CompTIA cert junkie there. But now I've been in IT since 2017. Actually, before that, I was in the Army. I was a medic. I was a deckhand on a steamboat.
Yeah, take us back to the beginning. The story of Matt Graham.
Okay, yeah. I was born and raised in New Orleans. Went into the Army right out of high school. Got out. Was at home for a little bit before Hurricane Katrina. And then did a little bit of construction work after that, basically installing cabinetry for all the damaged houses. Did that for about 6 months, and then
probably good business back then, right?
It was great business, but horrible working conditions. Mold all over the walls. People were remodeling their houses themselves, so you're going into houses that the kitchen's ready, but there's like 2 bedrooms that are still full of mold and junk. Yeah, that was absolutely horrible.
I actually had a client in New Orleans and Huma. Right, from when I was at PwC, just like after that time, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, right, it's crazy,
brutal.
Right?
I was actually on a steamboat. I was a deckhand on the steamer Natchez for the storm. So we decided to evacuate like the day they issued the mandatory evacuation. So we steamed up River North and tied up at a place called Bayou Gula. It's a little inlet off the river. It was behind a women's penitentiary. And so we spent, we were kind of dumb kids, and we were tying up to the biggest trees we could find, not realizing that they were cypress trees, and so there's no root structure. And so we were just knocking trees down all night and then slopping through the mud to go tie up to the next biggest tree, not understanding. So storm surge goes out in the morning, river drops 8 feet, and we get stuck in the mud for 10 days.
During Katrina?
Yeah. We couldn't get a towboat to get us out, so we had to wait 10 days because all the barges broke loose. So they were rounding those up.
What did you eat?
It was a daytime cruise ship. So we had like frozen fried chicken and just basically all the stuff out of the galley.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a towboat pull us out. We steamed up over to Baton Rouge, and our captain said, all right, we can't pay you guys anymore, so you don't have to go home, but we're not paying you.
Oh.
So me and my buddy went on LSU's campus and rented an apartment. And we were just doing construction for a little bit and ended up getting sick with the Katrina cough, or get this hacking cough.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's something to do with the mold. So my wife, after me running like 104-degree fever, she's like, you got to either get healthcare or do something else. So we ended up moving up to Northern Virginia, where our family evacuated to, and ended up working in a bar there. And
Frank Kayasi, also from New Orleans,
Okay.
like he talked about how his background as like a barista, like that really helped him. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
I actually got recruited out of that bar to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car and spent 7 years there.
Oh.
Running branches all over Northern Virginia. And then got tired of that, figured I could try my foot in some sales. So I did outside sales, basically pounding pavement I was actually selling cabinets, countertops, and appliances to apartment complexes. Did that for a couple years, sold some trash services to apartment complexes, and realized I'm really not the best salesperson. I'm kind of an anti-seller.
Sometimes those are the best, in my
It's
opinion,
like,
right?
you probably don't need this. But at the time, I was kind of bored with it, doing just general fiddling around with some IT stuff. And a buddy of mine introduced me to a company called Blue Canopy, who was doing an internship, and basically paid the same salary that I was making in sales. So I was like, sure, let's do it. I did desktop support over there for their development team it was about 3.5, 4 months. The goal was to learn all the NIST controls while you support that. And I blew
Sounds super fun.
a little bit, yeah. The goal was you could get out of the program once you pass your Security Plus. So I was studying constantly and breaking so many things. I don't know how many times I had to rebuild SQL servers to the point where it's like, oh, no, this is why we document every step of the way. But I got out of that, got put on to one of the contracts there over at the Department of Education, brand new assessor. My mentor really, I was tied to his hip for the first 6 months, following him around, doing all of his interviews. 4 months in, I was kind of leading some smaller assessments. A year in, I was leading full-scale assessments. Actually, by the end of my term there, I had done all the assessments for all the major student loan servicers. So I got to travel all over the country, see some really cool stuff, find some really cool things. As an assessor, you kind of want to find stuff, right?
Right.
But yeah, after that contract was kind of getting split up, I realized I don't really want to be tied to a specific federal contract. And we had started bringing in FedRAMP services into the department. And so I had a lot of exposure there.
So this is around 2013, 2012?
This was
2010?
2018?
2018?
Yeah, so they were starting to finally issue those agency ATOs.
Okay.
So I was in charge of doing all those package reviews and making their recommendations up to the CISO.
Sounds amazing.
It was actually a really good learning process. You get to see how each one of the 3 PAOs does things differently, who has good write-ups, who has bad write-ups. You learn a lot. And so from there, I was managing a pretty large team and got recruited by Coalfire. And they taught me a ton about true FedRAMP audits, the process.
Yep, they're great.
I mean, they're a machine, definitely worthy of their ranking on the list.
Right.
So then popped around to a couple other 3 PAOs when Prescient Security kind of found me, and they were in the final stages of going through their A2LA accreditation. So brought me on board. That was actually the third time that I had gone through that surveillance audit that year with separate companies. So it was the same auditor. So at one point he cut me off. He's like, Matt, you can't answer questions anymore. He's like, let somebody else do it. I was like, that's what I'm here for. Let's get across the finish line. So we became number 42 on the marketplace for 3PAO in February. It was official.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's really hard to do
effort.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. 42 will show you.
Yeah. I personally know of the pain and the things that go into that. So congrats. Way to go, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. A huge accomplishment for us.
Yeah.
Once we got that, kind of that hunger for that federal work kind of sprung up in the company. So I've slowly started adding different frameworks. So we'll be doing FISMA audits, General NIST 853. We're pursuing CMMC C3PAO status. So our goal is to have that be on the list for DIBCAC assessment by the end of the summer, and hopefully C3PAO by the end of the year. So
yeah, CMMC is probably, it looks like it's
primed to go.
It's primed to go. Yeah, 2025, right? Yeah. So, what are you guys seeing in terms of I guess there's a lot of ways to look at it. From clients, what is the worry that they have? Do they even, are they worried, or they're just kind of like,
So there's a huge panic right now that I'm seeing, and it's really revolving around that DoD equivalence memo that went out December 23rd, Christmas present, where the issue was be FedRAMP authorized, or at least FedRAMP equivalent at the moderate level, which that is causing a lot of turmoil. So it's getting us a lot of inquiries about FedRAMP, and from a CMMC standpoint, because the rule's not final, that everybody's not really sure where it's going.
Right.
And there's just not a lot of qualified assessors out there right now. So we're building those in-house with our team. So we'll be CCAs, hopefully by the end of the year, get our 3 assessments under us, so we get the green check box, and then really kind of steam through it. But there's just a lot of panic, confusion about what the requirements are, and is this really FedRAMP equivalent? It's different. It's more of an 800-171 sort of audit, but with DoD parameters, and having to potentially visit multiple sites to evaluate physical controls is going to be interesting, because we haven't had to do that for a while.
Right. Yeah, so when you're saying physical sites, you're saying like organization level physical sites, like the reception area, things like that.
You're following the CUI or the FCI, so wherever it is, you follow that trail and document it. So if there is a potential for federal contract information within a facility, you got to go look at the file cabinet and see where it might be.
Crazy, yeah. So customers really need to understand, where the data is coming in, and just be really clear, like, hey, the only way this gets in is this way. And when we were first starting Paramify, that was what we thought, right? Because we just started, and literally the only people who could log in was me, right? And my friend, and we were just, and Tyler, right? And we were just trying to figure out, how to give this service to other people. And so we said, well, we don't have any money, so we're not going to get FedRAMP yet. But our customer at the time, it was like, well, if you can demonstrate compliance with 171 assessment criteria, then do it. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll use Paramify to do that. And so that's what we did. And we're like, hey, CMFC, we were like, here we go. And it was good. It was a good exercise, but ultimately futile, in terms of what was expected. And we're like, well, okay, we learned something. And so we've been following CMMC for years, right? And and now we have it. And we're like, okay, great. Now we can help other people do it. But I think it's a good thing, because when you hear about the major breaches, there was another one. I've had multiple clients. They're big ones, right? That have they experience breaches, right? It's just hard, right? It's hard. Security is really hard, and it takes a lot. But what's interesting is those my clients, right? That have those issues. Their FedRAMP environments aren't the things that are getting breached, right? I think there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it shows that the framework works. NIST 803 itself is, there's 1,100 individual controls that you could pick from.
And then there's 1,300, and if you get into the requirements, AC2 is A through L. So it's not like one control.
Right.
It's A through L. What is that? What math is hard for me? A through L. How many is that? I'm not. No. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of controls.
Yeah, when we look at our basic evidence request list for a FedRAMP moderate system, we're validating 687 individual artifacts.
For Rev 4 or for Rev 5?
For Rev 5.
Yeah, for Rev 5, yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's 323 controls. So, it's a ton of work that goes into it, but it makes sense. The NIST 853 framework, I've seen it implemented poorly, where, that org-defined parameter is whenever. And that's not really the intent of it. FedRAMP, I think, puts teeth behind it and says you do this way, And it makes it easier to assess against too, because you're just basically saying, do you do the thing?
Yeah.
How did you do the thing? Did you document it?
Did you document it? That's the hard part, right?
The documentation is probably the biggest pain point and the biggest barrier to entry for most folks is, like I was talking earlier, we get customers that say, I got to go FedRAMP moderate. Why? It's like, well, because somebody told me to. It's like, well, you got to do your FIPS 1IN categorization. So go look up NIST 860 and figure out your information types, and then we'll figure out if you're moderate or not. And then once you figure that out, here's all the other things that you got to do: your SSP, your policies, your procedures, your
plans,
everything, and then document
appendices A through R.
Yes, all of your appendices. I can't believe it's up to R now. I'm waiting for this so they get to like A, Z.
We actually, so in our packages, we have S because that section 9.3 from Rev 4 was actually really useful for me as a practitioner, to say like, okay, like here's all my roles when you could fill it out digitally. But it was such a pain to do manually to say like, okay, can these users be represented appropriately? And then what was section 13? And so we already had like the capability in Paramify, so we just said, hey, we'll just paste it into Appendix S. Right? It was recommended by one of our partners. They said, hey, this is great. This is a really useful table, right? Yeah. So it's like sometimes it's useful, but
yeah. I mean, I do like that you can make FedRAMP work for you as long as you're meeting all the requirements. You can go above and beyond, but I think it's a simple framework. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. You have a list of instructions. I think everything about FedRAMP is pretty simple. It's just how do you do it as painlessly as possible? Yeah,
I've actually never heard anyone say that, man. It's like simple, but I guess what it is, like when I think of controls, it is simple because I mean it's simple to us. It's simple to you. You're a CISSP, right? You've been around it like all the time, but other people, like I think it is simple, but just the sheer amount of documentation and the sheer amount of requirements makes it seem that it's not. And then when you see the spaghetti, like, so I give this example a lot, when we're changing our SSO component, in 59 places in the SSP, and then like also like, appendices A through R, like, it gets, people get scared by that. It can be simple though, because security is simple. It's what are your people? Where's your data? Where are you deploying it? And what are the things you're using to control it, right? It is simple when you did it there, but...
Yeah, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. That's kind of one of our core values. It's simplifying complex, simplifying security. And I think you can do that with the FedRAMP framework, just because of the way it builds on itself. If you look at each one of the control families, it starts very, very basic policy and procedure, and then moves on from there. It gets more granular, and then you have all of your crazy enhancements in there. But really, it's a script. Run the script, and as long as you get most of that stuff there, or have a plan to get it there, it's usually not that challenging to get into it. But it's a huge investment. Just to do that, you have to buy all the stuff that supports all of those controls. I think the general consensus out there is you have a range of $200,000 to $2 million to get this done.
Right.
And it's a huge investment for folks,
huge,
especially when they're transitioning from, say like they're SOC compliant. Hey, that's great. You're probably 30% of the way where you need to be for FedRAMP, but
maybe even less. Yeah. Right. Honestly,
and the controls aren't direct mapping, and there's so many templates and very specific parameters that it's a huge lift. And trying to break it down from an advisory standpoint, it's difficult. It's easier as an auditor because again, you're just asking, do you do the thing? And they do it or they don't.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so much here. This is exciting, right? So. Yeah, when you mentioned SOC 2, one of the components of SOC 2, it's like, hey, you tell me, management tells me what controls they have, right? So they might not even include something like multi-factor authentication. You can still have an unqualified report. Unqualified is good, guys, right? Some people say, like, I got a qualified report. And they think, like, my friend, we had Troy Fine on the podcast the other day, and he has this awesome meme. The Jurassic Park Nedry one where he's like, hey, He's like, he's got a qualified report here. He's like, see, no one cares. They think that's good, right?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite ones. Shout to Troy Fine. But yeah, we'll have to show that in the YouTube, right? Or put it in the show notes. It's a great meme. Thanks, Troy. Anyways, what I was saying before that awesome side quest was that, SOC 2, it's kind of a buffet of controls. Some people look at it that, right? And so when we're going and like helping our clients say like, hey, we used a tool, right, to get here, and you're about right? That's like, okay, you got like 25% of the things, right? But there's a lot more capability that goes into a security program, and you can't really skip out on things for good reason, right? So that's good. So Matt, you in your career, you mentioned you went straight into assessment, kind of like, I mean, you were breaking stuff at Blue Canopy, right? You were breaking stuff. That's pretty cool, and you were doing certifications. But you early on in your career were getting into assessment, and I've always been a proponent of taking that route, because my first job in cyber and my thrust into cyber was at PwC, right? And you learn those very basic things that are simple, controlling access to things, what's changing within the environment, how does data come in and out, through either manual or automated procedures, and then, and that's about it, right? So it's like access and change and computer operations, right? And like the whole program around managing, the SDLC of that environment, right? So that takes a lot of audits to, you had a mentor, right?
Yeah. Shout out to Nick if you're watching.
Hey, Nick.
But yeah.
Thanks for giving us Matt.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he really was a great example of just, I don't know everything, and these people that I'm auditing know a whole lot more about what they're doing than I do. I know what the control requirement is, but and you will find system personnel are very proud of their systems, and they want to show you everything and tell you all about it. So one of the key points of auditing is just being open, asking open-ended questions, letting them show you, and then every once in a while you trip them into a finding because you might have seen that misconfigured before. But you get to see all kinds of cool stuff and learn about it, like from people that actually practice it. I mean, I'll never learn everything about everything, but
right.
I know how to ask questions, so you can show me about it and then document if you did it or not. But
yeah. So to me, that's a great way to get into cyber, right? Is because you get to learn from absolute experts that really know how things should be. Something that's really core to us is that those guys that actually implement the systems, they're the ones that should understand more than the auditor what the control is, right? And they should be responsible for making sure that that's maintained and everything. And so being an auditor, you just know that, hey, I know I don't know everything, but over time, it's a lot what you could learn. Like you can learn quite a bit.
Yeah,
right?
Or just understanding, as a sysadmin, or you're maybe not really involved in how risky is this action that I'm taking? Is this configuration management control board really necessary? Because I can just click the button. So breaking it down to them kind of with a different perspective. A lot of folks are appreciative about it. They're like, yeah, we probably should be doing that a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the buy-in, explaining the why. I hate writing findings. I mean, sometimes they're really interesting, funny ones.
Comedy of errors, right?
Yeah. But for the most
thought
part,
this would be a good idea.
It's a lot more effort to write a finding, where if you can issue a preliminary finding and they go back and remediate it real quick and they understand the risk of it, and getting management kind of compliance and buy-in there. If somebody's just like, we have to get FedRAMP because somebody told us to, and they don't understand the why, then it's going to be a argument throughout the entire assessment. And I always hate sitting across from the compliance guy who's like just reading you the SSP and thinks that that's acceptable.
Right. They, because like they just got a job, right, to just basically do FedRAMP for someone, and it totally shows.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like anyone where you just have GRC run everything, it has to be the person who's actually implementing the system if it's going to be effective security. Another maxim of us is like it takes a village to raise a security program. So I messed that up, right? It takes a village to raise a security program, and it's everybody. There's the technical roles within DevOps, within InfoSec, within incident response and the SOC and all that stuff. But then there's also HR, and there's even, management, right? All of them are important in implementing security. And when you abdicate that to some little group, you get a mediocre result, and you deserve it, right?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite controls is AT3, is role-based security training, and everybody gets it wrong. Like, we all take security awareness training. I was like, no, let's dive into role-based. So you are an HR person. What does your security training look like? I take the general security awareness training. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit further about that. What do your developers take? Everybody has some sort of certification that they're maintaining for whatever specific role they have on the technical side. But how are you training your managers? How are you training your HR people to understand their role completely within the entire security framework? And that's one that typically gets assigned to the most junior assessor, and almost always gets a pass because you don't look at it from that sort of perspective. So that's kind of some of the things that my mentor taught me, is just kind of looking at the reading the control requirement, read the discussion, really understand like what's the risk if this isn't done. HR person doesn't follow good personnel documentation management, and then all of a sudden everybody's information is out there. Yeah, we probably shouldn't have just forwarded that in an unencrypted email about our CEO's benefits.
Yeah, man. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that goes wrong, like as an auditor. Matt, when you're because you had the federal practice now, and you're going to be hiring a lot as you grow. If someone's looking to get into audit, you're not giving like the answers to the test, but what kinds of things are you looking for when you're hiring talent to run assessments for your program?
I really like non-traditional career paths. Folks that have kind of dabbled in other things. Folks that are, lifelong learners. People that are, trying to either figure out what they're doing or, maybe just they're not happy with where their current career path is going, and they're like, Matt seems pretty happy doing cyber, and everybody's like, I want to get in cyber, and it's like, well, what is that? Like, you want to go and break stuff? You want to go pen test stuff? You want to go try and sneak through people's doors, or you want to do what I do, which is work with spreadsheets and ask people, do you do the thing or not do the thing? And everybody's like, I don't think my wife even understands what I do anymore. She just says he audits something for the government and works with spreadsheets.
I stopped trying to explain it.
I stopped trying. But I think she mostly gets it now. But when I try and explain it to people, it's like, it's kind of like a constant learning process. You're going in, you're learning about these systems. So that's what I'm looking for in folks is folks that want to learn something new. You got to be a little bit personable. You got to be able to get a good read on people. My wife makes fun of me because another weird thing I do is watch police interrogation videos a lot. Okay.
What got you into that? Is anything with the Army like in the past, or no? Just like
it was just a weird like random YouTube like algorithm feed that popped up once, and I was like, this is really interesting. And then I've binged so much of it where these people, you back somebody into a corner where they're absolutely 100% know that they're busted. And I've actually used that before in auditing.
Okay. We'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah. Someone's going to get more traffic.
Yeah, we were reviewing a system inventory, and the compliance guy was like, I'm in charge of reviewing the system inventory. We're like, okay, cool. When's the last time you reviewed it? And he's like, I did it. And he looks it up, and it's like, we did it at the quarterly or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so you personally reviewed this? Yes. Okay, well, then tell us about this 2008 R2 server that's EOL. He's like, maybe that's inaccurate. So we just kind of completely backed out of it. Turns out it was still there. But yeah, nice critical finding there.
Yeah, that's super critical, right? Yeah, my favorite one still is like, hey, like just a really simple one, an important one, right? Especially back then, was like the access reviews, right? Because SSO wasn't super prominent, right? Yeah, where I mean, it's still not implemented correctly in a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember like access reviews, and I'm like, wow, this one looks exactly, because I was looking at the work papers from last year, and this one, I'm like, wow, this screenshot, no way, this looks exact. Oh, yeah. So it didn't end well for that person, right? I mean, like they probably weren't very happy at the job anyway. So it was like
a very large company told me that there was no requirement to segment the network behind the firewall once.
Makes sense.
I was like, well, technically that's not in writing, but I think it's part of secure engineering principles.
Yeah.
So you should probably do that.
Yeah. That's right. So, okay. So we were talking before we started recording a little bit about, Rev 5. What are some of the things with FedRAMP Rev 5 that, you're glad there's some good, nice changes with Rev 5, and maybe some of the things you're like, man, they didn't fix that, or it's like, dude, that's worse. So
yeah, I mean, I like that they incorporated privacy throughout. That was always interesting with doing the privacy overlays on the government side. Having the supply chain in there is a bit tricky because it's a little ill-defined right now. But I do think it's going to help out the FedRAMP space at least a little bit. I think the government's going to struggle to grow with that because nobody wants to take on that responsibility. So it's really probably a department level responsibility. But each individual agency is kind of trying to define their own thing right now. So hopefully they get that sorted out, get that consolidated. I think the other thing that's kind of tripping people up right now is the red team exercise.
Yeah. There was no guidance, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at CA8 Enhancement 2, it really kind of speaks specifically to like phishing exercises, and that's really already kind of an attack vector for the 6 attack vectors. But my interpretation of it is that it is a little bit more active exploitation of that phishing exercise. So maybe not just seeing who clicks the link, gives you their credentials, but then actually having the pen test team go in and try and exploit. See what they can do with those credentials. That's kind of the way we're looking at it right now, but hopefully we'll get some clear guidance on it.
Nice.
But yeah, I think even the aspect that can potentially be an internal red team exercise, but then it's kind of up to the 3PAO assessor does it really meet FedRAMP requirements, or I don't know. I haven't got that in front of PMO yet to actually have to defend a finding or a non-finding. So we'll see.
Are there any? So you mentioned kind of the process for hacking something. So you mentioned like someone fishes credentials, and then now we're going into, let's see if we can get onto the network and see what we can get. Are there any interesting hacks that that you've learned from in the past that you're like, wow, dang, they really or yeah? No,
I mean, I try not to mess around with the pen test team too much. I don't want them to know me too well because they can probably find whatever I'm up to.
Yeah.
I mean, we've always had dedicated penetration test resources, so definitely something I want to learn more about. But it's just amazing the capability of some of these guys.
Yeah,
right? They can go and
incredible,
really find some weird stuff.
Yeah. We sponsored an event in Park City recently, and it was really cool. It was the Operate Cybersecurity Conference, and it was a great venue because like all of the sponsors, we were just all in the same room, just with a bunch of CISOs from Utah and all around. Really great event, but they had incredible speakers there, and I'm just like, oh man, we're so screwed, right? Like if someone has enough resources and enough time, it's really hard to defend against that. So again, I mean, I feel like we need to make it as easy as possible for people to implement good security practices. Is already hard enough. And the weapons that are available to adversaries are just, they're available and there's a lot of them. And so the threat is real. I'm I'm not a FUD person. I'm just like, yeah, like whatever. I'm usually not really moved because I remember finding critical findings in like just executives when I was younger. I'm like, hey, this is a really big deal, right? And no one really cared, like at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the way things kind of get exploited. That's why I think that supply chain is a really good addition. The way kind of FedRAMP has put that hard requirement on external system services. I honestly think that's a kind of a gimme to all the assessors out there that's saying you're always going to have a job because there's going to be some service out there that's going to come down the chain that's a cloud-based service and like, oh, that's an SA9 finding. You got to go get FedRAMP authorized. So it's going to keep us in business forever. But
yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, I'm sorry, everybody, but yeah, we got to do what we got to do.
Got to secure the supply chain.
But we really do.
Oh, absolutely.
It's absolutely critical, right? And so, yeah, I'm glad that we're moving in. And CMMC, I think, is helping that, right? Because now, because CMMC, for those who don't know, that is applying like CUI in non-federal environments, right? So that's the scope. So if data is in a FedRAMP system, that's not in scope for CMMC, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a FedRAMP authorized service. I mean, it's still, you follow the chain of the data and where it's no longer your responsibility. And so FedRAMP, they kind of get a pass. For
what's a federal system, right? If you ATO like GovCloud, a GovCloud system, you're logging in and you say, hey, this is a Gov system. If you log in to Zoom, the government version of Zoom, right? It says like, hey, this is a government system at the very front.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Those external services, because they're meeting that FedRAMP requirement, they're not so worrisome for CMMC. But a lot of this is clearly define that authorization boundary. So as long as you're not managing, as long as you're not GovCloud, you're pretty good on it. But yeah, I guess that's one of the other struggles that people are having is as they try and break into FedRAMP is defining that authorization boundary. Because a lot of folks are like, this is just our system. And it's like, well, you should build a FedRAMP boundary itself. Specifically, try not to leave all of your workstations and laptops in scope. Find some way to, connect securely to that environment.
Yeah. What are the ways that you guys see? I know I've seen a lot of different things, right? What are the ways that you see people removing things like a laptop? Things that you're doing every day. They're installing like here. You want to like work, so you're installing like Spotify. You're installing things like where they can listen to music while they grind and they build out some code, right? And you want to be a fun place to work. But if you bring those systems into scope, all of a sudden you're like, hey, are you privileged? Are you a privileged role on this system? And like, did you do a change ticket for that change, right? And so you want those things out. So what are some of the ways, some quick wins for people to do that?
Yeah, what we're kind of recommending and what we're building for our own CMMC environment is a VDI solution. So building out a full federal enclave and then having a VDI implementation there so that nothing can come out of the boundary. So that takes the laptop out of scope. So the laptop can still be a corporate laptop, and we don't have to send assessors to everybody's house to look at their environment to see if they're printing out CUI or federal contract information. So that's the recommendation that we're making right now. The other option is this is a very locked down corporate laptop. You'd have to shut off all of the peripherals, no printing.
But then that's a control that has to get assessed, right? And you're just like,
so
and they're going to take a sample of the laptops and like,
yeah. I mean, so the idea would be do as much, scope down as much as possible. Really, there should be only one clear connection into the environment, and everything stays within the environment.
Yeah, and it's not, and I think people get confused here, right? They get confused saying like, hey, we don't want to secure everything. That's not the thing. It's just like, hey, we need to secure what's important because you can do anything you want in life. You can't do everything, right? So you have limited resources, and so you need to scope what your assessment is going to include, and you got to do it smart, right? You got to design your system in a way that data is going to be protected. And so it's not just saying like a lot of people think like, oh yeah, like we don't want them to look there, right? Because they might find data in there. That's bad, right? What you want is like say, no. What we're saying is we've designed the system so there is, there's not going to be data here.
Yeah,
right?
we built the box correctly. And so nothing can get outside the box.
It's not about deception, right? That's one of the last points that I wanted to hit on before we, talk about whatever else, right? One of the things I wanted to talk about was there's this feeling that the relationship with an auditor is almost always adversarial, right? Because you just talked about interrogating a person, right? So people are like, oh my gosh, the auditor's here, I hate that guy, right? Because I've been on the other end of that. But that's not really the case. It doesn't need to be adversarial. What is important is that you're upfront about what the gaps are and where you are in your journey, right? Because to say that things are perfect when they're not, they're not perfect. It's just starting off on the wrong foot, right? And it raises scrutiny everywhere, and then the right thing doesn't get done. So it's really important that you're truthful and honest about what the real situation is, and then you have a plan to get there, right?
Yeah. Watch any police interrogation video. It's the same way. They're always your buddy. And as long as you're truthful with me, we're going to get out of this. It's fine. I always approach it, yes, there are those techniques where you want to be friendly, and really I am generally friendly. It's really just it's not
so far, Matt. I can vouch for that. Matt's been great. Everybody,
thanks.
He's been awesome.
But it's you figure it out. At the end of the day, I don't write the requirements. I'm not the one who's making you go through this. You're voluntarily going through this, or as part of a contract that you willfully signed. We're just here to ask, do you do the thing? If you try and hide it from me, it's gonna it raises red flags. I'm gonna go dig further. If we're sitting in an interview session and you bring in your sysadmin, and I ask him to start clicking and you stop him, then we're going to look very closely at all of your configuration files and figure out why you stopped him from clicking maybe into your VPN configuration on the local laptop because you brought that in scope for some reason.
Yeah, when you don't trust the people in an organization, there's no way to be secure because collusion, it breaks all control, right? Collusion, it breaks all control. So the last thing you want to do is not be able to trust the people that are that are trying to secure things, right, and trying to do the right thing, right? So absolutely.
That's why I like the NIST 853, that FISMA FedRAMP framework. We are not the decider here. we just document it. We will make a recommendation one way or the other, but it's not up to us to accept risk on anybody's behalf. So we're just acting as this independent third party. It should be a collaborative sort of engagement. And I would say most of the customers that I work with do approach it that way. And the ones that haven't, they're probably not still doing very well. But there's a reason there's POAMs. There's a reason to get things fixed.
I think the future is bright. There's a lot. We talked about how FedRAMP is going to become just more and more important. So is CMMC, controls in general. Cyber is more and more important, not less. Just look at any Gartner report, right? Forecast. It's here to stay, and it's really important. So what are you excited about in terms of some of the tools and capabilities that are coming out, like the Force for Good? We talked about the adversarial ones, and those are scary. Well, what are some of the tools that you're seeing that are exciting, really helping people do the right thing a lot easier? Right?
Yeah, I'm really excited that, as FedRAMP, as the number of systems in there expand, they're getting a little bit more specialized. So it's not, you're having a lot of boutique, small software as a service that's configured properly, it's authorized, and that can easily be adapted versus somebody that's using either their homebrew method or something that's potentially a little shady. But it still gets the job done, but it's never been tested or proven. So as that expands, all of those little unique tools can be used and adapted in a consistent manner. So I think that's going to be huge for everybody's security posture. But also, as automation is getting a little bit more advanced, Paramify, that documentation process is going to become a lot easier, which will allow a lot of those small boutique sort of services who even probably never even thought about FedRAMP, but now they're getting kind of pushed into it. It's going to make it a lot more accessible for them. Ideally, since things can happen quicker, it's going to cost less. So,
right.
And then all of those niche tools, you're going to have a full government suite of standardized tool sets that meet all of the security requirements, and you don't have to worry about giving your information to the government,
right.
which is always kind of a daunting aspect.
Yeah. Well, Matt, congratulations to Prescient Security. I'm really excited that we get to work together a little bit, and you guys are doing so many great things, and so excited, and we should do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So glad to have you on. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
All right. Take care, guys.